Okay, this is part 21 of Rebel. Eden, I know you're hungry. I glare at Han. I'm standing at the door to his Undercity Estate's dining room, with two of his guards behind me. He's sitting at the opposite end of a round table, observing me with his hands tucked casually into his pockets. I'd spent most of the afternoon at the construction site, helping them integrate my drone's engine into their own. The structure they're working with glowed a pulsing blue the entire time, casting its light against my skin. I can still see the rhythm of its color whenever I close my eyes. The entire time, Han had looked impressed with what I'd done. Now he frowns at me as I stand swaying in the doorway. Are you refusing to sit down because you're worried about your brother? I mean, it's not like I've forgotten about him or anything, I reply a little too sharply. I've helped you as much as you wanted me to. The man pauses to cough, his heaving, sickly cough. Then he sighs and glances at the guards behind me. Leave him here. The two guards exchange an uncertain look with each other, but it's only for the briefest moment. Then they're bowing their heads in unison to their boss and stepping back. I hear the door close behind me, sealing me in with my kidnapper. The guards are probably standing watch on the other side now. I hadn't heard any footsteps echoing away from us. Han motions for me to take a seat at the table. You'll do your brother no good by just standing there. Sit down, please. Eat something. You're going to need your strength no matter what you do. He acts like this is a completely normal day for him. How large is this underground estate? I try to remember the distance that I'd walked today, then guess at how much more space there might be down here. What if he's not keeping Daniel here at all, but at some other location? When I still don't move, he gestures again toward the seat. Behind me comes a faint knock on the door. I step aside as it swings open, this time letting in a cook bearing 2 silver trays. She hurries past me to the table, places the trays at each of our place settings, and then bows to Han like all the others. She doesn't even bother with looking at me as she steps out of the room. Whatever the food is, it smells delicious. My stomach rumbles in spite of itself. I hesitate a while longer. Then I finally walk over to the table and slowly lower myself into the second chair. Han lifts the cover of his own tray. I've been told you're a vegetarian, Han says. Your dish has been adjusted to your tastes. His words send a chill through me. How does he know that? Thanks, I mutter, the word thick with sarcasm. I can tell you're no stranger to tense situations, he says. I'm guessing that's from your days back in the Republic. I watch him as he lifts a forkful of steaming fish to his lips. I had my share of moments, I finally reply. He looks up briefly at me from his meal. I can respect that. News about what was happening in the Republic back then was sparse, but I followed it. It was a worthy cause, what you and your brother fought for. I narrow my eyes at him. He's baiting me, praising my brother while he keeps him locked up in some other room. What does someone like you know about what we went through? I say, your family survived based on the whim of your government. Isn't that true? Your brother was someone like me, an underdog, a rebel, a wanted criminal. I understand more than you know what it means to be under the authorities' thumb. Except my brother fought for the people, I reply, and as far as I know, you sound like you take advantage of those down here in the Undercity. He doesn't look offended by my words. Instead, he bows his head and smiles grimly. I am one of those down here in the Undercity, he replies. What happens down here has directly affected me all of my life. What do you mean? I don't think I've been very fair to you, he says. You are, understandably, worried about your brother. And while you've told me many things about yourself, you still don't know much about me. So I'm going to make a deal with you. What kind of deal? I mutter. He puts his fork down and laces his fingers together, then gives me a steady look. I'm going to let your brother go, he says, if you finish helping me install your engines on our machines. I wasn't expecting him to say that. You're what? I blurt out. I'm going to let him go, he repeats. I told you that none of this was about him and that my only interest in him was to find a way to get to you. He holds a hand out to me. But here you are. You've demonstrated your talent already by what you've done here. He leans back in his chair. So I'm going to do what I promised myself I would. I'm going to release him. He must be lying to me. It doesn't make any sense for him to let Daniel go, not when he could keep using my brother against me. How can I even trust that you do such a thing? I ask. He nods. Because I'll show you, he replies. I'll send you a live feed of him being released. I shake my head, confused and wary. I don't understand. Han sighs, then leans against his armrest and regards me carefully. When he speaks again, there's a strange tinge of sadness in his voice. You remind me very much of my son. Your son? I ask. Like I said, you've offered so much about yourself. It's only fair now that I tell you a little bit about me. It's the only way we'll build trust around each other. He regards my question. So let me enlighten you about where I came from. Everything about him now, his grave expression, the sudden exhaustion in his eyes, the weight on his shoulders, seems serious, and instinctively I feel myself leaning forward to listen. I grew up down here, he says, in the Undercity, just like your friend Pressa. My mother and father worked a tiny stall in the market selling fried skewers. I remember running in the dirty streets, just like you, weaving through the crowds at the markets, helping my parents until the late hours of the night. Like you and your brother, I grew up learning how to fill the holes in my pockets with things I could steal from others. I had to, you see. We could barely feed ourselves. Something strange clicks in my mind. For an instant I see John circling before me, as tall and rumpled as I remember. His hands burn from his factory shift. He slaps a stolen coin from my hands and kicks the money into the gutter. Don't ever do that again, he scolds me. The next time that money will come with street police at our door. It's never worth it. I shake the memory away, my stomach churning uneasily. My eyes dart for a second to the corridor behind us, where 2 guards stand now, and then go back to him. I married into the Undercity too, you know, he continues. I loved my wife, and we had a son that mattered more to us than anything else in the world. Loved. Had. The mention of his son again. Except he got sick. His eyes flatten at that. The rasp in his voice trembles. So did I. It was a common side effect in our neighborhood, located so close to the factories on the outskirts of the city. The smoke from the factories turned my son's lungs black and shriveled. His grades fell in school, and his level fell because of that. I began to cough blood. He had to start once. The infection in my lungs cost me my job. That lowered my level further. They punish you for not working, you know, this government. And the lower my level fell, the harder it became for me to qualify for work. There's a brief silence from him. So my wife took out a loan with the legal businesses that run down here, made a deal with them in order to pay for our son's illness. She agreed to something we couldn't possibly pay back. What happened? I whisper. I came home one day to find her body in our ransacked apartment. His words make my chest tighten. He says it so calmly and quietly that I can tell it's something he's used to saying. Suddenly I see the soldier, Thomas, his name was Thomas, lifting a rifle to my mother's head. John lunges in vain against the guards holding him back. June holds out a helpless hand in an attempt to stop him. They left a note demanding payment by threatening our son, so I did the only thing I could. I offered to work for the gang, to pay off the debt. He's silent for a moment, the weight of it hanging between us in the air. It didn't matter in the end. My son died a couple of months later. He could be lying to you. But I swallow hard, feeling sick at his story. There is nothing that feels false about these words. I don't blame the Undercity, Dominic Hahn says, snapping me to the present again. People are businessmen. They step in when no one else will. There's a need for services like illegal loans down here, for the people forgotten by your government. He points up at the ceiling. No, I blame this entire damn system, the levels and the floors and the hierarchy of this place that made it impossible for us to get out of our predicament. I blame the fact that the president sells the Undercity the dream that, if they only worked hard enough, they too could level themselves up to the sky floors. I blame the fact that the dream is a fantasy. It's as if he's having the exact same conversation I'd had with Daniel. The Undercity has no choice but to be the way it is. I find myself staring back at Han with a confused look, trying to understand how a ruthless, notorious killer can make so much sense, can grieve a family he had lost just as I lost mine. Is it still true, though? I managed to say at last. The things you've done to people here. You killed that councilman the other night. I swallow hard. You've murdered Undercity citizens in the same way that your own family was murdered. You want to play a game? He says coolly. Play it down here, where there are no rules at all. Then it's fair. You do what you have to do to survive. Everyone knows what the game they're playing is. There are no unfulfilled promises, no special favors. It's just business here. His eyes harden. That I can work with. He looks for that taunting edge in his I look for that taunting edge in his expression, but Dominic Hahn looks genuine now. His eyes lit up in earnest as if trying to convince me of his words. And for an instant I can see him rising up the ranks of this dangerous world, drawing people to him with nothing but his own resolve. Like Daniel. The thought is so startling that I shove it away in fright. And if someone doesn't want to work their way up like you, I say through gritted teeth, every hair on my skin feels like it's standing on end. His cold ease has returned. Few don't, he replies. Why wouldn't they, when the system's decks are stacked against them anyway? Surely you of all people can understand that. Stop comparing me with you. Why not? He leans toward me. You're instinctively drawn to this place. This is where you feel at home. Down here, where you can keep all those memories swirling in your head at bay. I wince. In spite of everything, I find myself struggling to breathe, impressed that this criminal, this murderer, has figured out secrets about me that my own brother hasn't been able to understand. He knows me better than Daniel does. His words pierce straight through me, as if he could see the dreams that swallow me whole every night. You can't understand why your brother is no longer in the same place you are, Han adds. Hadn't he been just like me, made his entire reputation off fighting for the people, but he's left behind that dark place from his past. Now he works for the government, helping to enforce the system that's crushing us, working to dismantle what people like me are trying to do. He's trying to turn me against my brother, convincing me of something I've always disliked. His work for the AIS, his siding with this government that is crippling its people. And if he were saying this to someone else, maybe it would even work. I see Daniel's face, his worried expression. I think of the way he'd argued with the director, how he'd railed against the system. He doesn't support the level system either, but it doesn't matter. He still works for the AIS. Han sips from his glass. So you see, Eden, he says as I hesitate. I'm not trying to force you into anything, but what I am saying is that I think you're a better fit down here than you think. Even if you left, even if I let you go or you escaped, you'd come back. You belong here. You belong here. A part of me wonders if this is what he tells everyone before he kills them, but another part of me knows he's right, because I do keep coming back. What is the machine that you're building, then? I finally ask him. It's the question that has been waiting on the tip of my tongue. What does that have anything to do with what does that have anything... Oh my God. What does that have to do with anything you've just told me? What exactly am I helping you to do? Han gives me a pointed look. Finish installing your engine today, he says, and we can run a blank sample test. Then you can see for yourself. When we head out after dinner to the construction site, there's no hint at all on Dominic Hahn's face that he had revealed any weakness to me. Instead, he seems cool, almost cold. There's none of the weight and the anguish that he'd let me witness when he told me about what happened to his family. I wonder whether he's genuinely confiding in me. How much longer? Han asks me now as he walks over to where I'm working. I look up at the structure. The new engine I've installed is mostly in place now, the new pieces expanding on top of the original drone engine I'd built so that I can conduct enough power for the whole machine. The rest of Han's workers are already securing the final pieces. I point at one end of the machine, the portion that's supposed to send some sort of signal out. It's all I've managed to puzzle out about what the whole thing does. They're installing the last piece now, I say to Han. The signal needs to be amplified more than you thought if you plan on making it hit the entire city, so I need to make sure it gets that boost. Han studies the engine I've made closely. And this will work, he says, lifting an eyebrow at me. I wish it didn't, but everything else about the machine was already in place. All it needed was enough of a power boost, and my engine has given him that. My silence is the answer that he needs. He smiles in approval at me, then straightens. I want to see a demonstration of it, then, he says. Send out a blank sample of a signal. Of course he wants to test it. I glance to where his guards are watching us, then back to the machine where one of his workers comes over to start programming in a blank sample to test the signal. You look nervous, Eden, Han says to me as I watch them work. It's as if you don't believe in the capabilities of your engine. It works, I reply, but there's a slight tremble in my voice. Is he really going to free Daniel if this works? I think back to everything Han had told me about himself. If I fail this, will Han kill me? It's all part of his business, after all. We wait until the programmer has finished inputting a sample signal. It's fast, the work of a moment. I watch carefully as he does it, observing the chip he places on the machine and then the info he swipes right onto the system. He steps away from the machine, then nods at us. Ready, he says. Good. Han nods. Good. We all take a step back from the machine. Send the signal out. The machine's coil begins to glow. At its bottom, my drone engine, now with its power amplified, grows a bright oh my god, glows a bright, brilliant blue. Maybe everything I calculated is incorrect. My engine will fail the machine. If that happens, what will he do with Daniel? For a moment, nothing happens. I hold my breath, waiting. Then a pulse comes from the machine. It ripples out in a wave of vibration that tingles through my body. On the machine's monitor, the entirety of Ross City lights up with green dots, millions of them. When I look over at Han, his eyes are bright and focused. A smile plays on his face. The signal works. I can see it written all over his expression, and in spite of myself, I feel a wild surge of pride at what my engine is capable of. This is the first real test of something I've made, and Dominic Hahn, of all people, is the one who gave me the chance to do it. My delight makes me recoil in horror. Hahn glances at me and nods. You're pleased, he says, and it goes beyond your desire to protect your brother. I'm too afraid to say anything back. He studies me curiously. Could it be because, deep down, you believe in everything that I've told you before? You promised me that you would release my brother if this worked, I say through clenched teeth. How good is your word? Don't ever question my word. Han looks to his side and nods once. Two of his guards don't even hesitate for a breath. They bow immediately, then leave without a word. I want to see it, I say, on a live feed like you told me. Done. Han turns back to me. Any other requests? He asks. My palms are slick with sweat, and my heart shivers with each beat. There's the final question I have, the one that Han hasn't answered up until now, and that I'm almost too scared to ask. What's the signal for? I say, my voice coming out like a hoarse whisper. What does your machine do? Han smiles sidelong at me. I look back up at the machine. My gaze settles on the screen full of green dots. And suddenly I know. The levels that had crushed his family, the system that had forced his mother's hand, the points, the game that runs the city. I know what this machine is going to do. It's going to take down Ross City's entire level system.